The scent of bleach and pine cleaner clung to my skin as I tossed my keys onto the chipped counter of my one-bedroom rental. It was nearly midnight. My lower back throbbed. My fingers felt like sandpaper, and my only dream at that moment was a hot shower and 6 hours of peace. That was my version of luxury back then. To my family, I was still stuck in that life. The exhausted cleaning woman barely scraping by, and I let them believe it. I played the part. They liked their stories simple. I was the one who stayed behind the disappointment. The failure who never left town. What they didn't know was that every floor I scrubbed, every disgusting apartment I transformed was part of a much larger game they weren't even aware I was playing. The old answering machine blinked red like an accusing eye. 3 new messages. I pressed play. "Hey, Jade, my sister." Chelsea chirped, her voice coated in artificial sweetness. "Just reminding you. Dad's birthday dinner is this Friday, 7 p.m. Don't be late again. Love you." Message 2 was worse. "Jade, we're ordering from Giovanni's. It's probably a little out of your budget. So maybe eat before you come, sweetie," my mom said, trying to sound helpful. "Also, don't feel pressured to bring a gift, just your presence is enough like always." The last one hit the hardest. My dad voice as dry as sandpaper. "No weird homemade crap this year. Just show up. Say happy birthday, don't ruin the vibe." I stood in my tiny kitchen and let their words burn through me. It wasn't just what they said, it was what they didn't say. The assumptions they carried about me, that I was still struggling, still lost, still beneath them. But what none of them knew was this: I was a ghost in plain sight. And ghosts, we don't beg to be seen. We haunt quietly, methodically. They didn't know I owned 5 companies, that I hit my first million at 27. Or that Inc. magazine was about to feature me in a cover story titled "The Invisible Architect Behind a Billion-Dollar Lifestyle Brand." I hadn't said yes to the interview yet. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew the timing had to be perfect, and the clock had just started ticking. It all began 8 years ago. I was 24, freshly heartbroken, broke, and scared. I had dropped out of grad school to care for the only person who had ever really believed in me. My Nana, she raised me while my parents were too busy climbing career ladders and pretending I didn't exist. When she got sick, I stayed. Everyone else sent flowers and condolences from far away. After she passed, I had nothing. No degree, no job, no backup plan. I found a Craigslist ad for a local cleaning job and I took it. I told myself it was temporary. That temporary turned into months. Until one rainy afternoon, I cleaned the townhouse of a woman named Adelaide Brooks. She was old, money, faded pearls, and tailored linen kind. But unlike the others, she looked at me. Not threw me at me. "You're clever," she said, as I reorganized her overstuffed library in under an hour. "Why are you wasting your brain wiping up other people's messes?" I told her I didn't have the luxury of dreaming big. She smiled, then handed me a book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. "Start here," she said, "then keep going." I read it that night. Twice. Then I read 5 more. Something in me woke up. I started cleaning with AirPods and devouring business podcasts while scrubbing grout. I watched how rich people lived, what they outsourced, what they didn't even notice. And then the idea struck. What if luxury home care wasn't about cleaning at all? What if it was about peace of mind? About making chaos disappear without ever being noticed? Not just a cleaning service, a lifestyle operation. High-end, tech-based, anonymous, efficient. I started saving every dollar, skipped dinners, shared a 1-bathroom flat with 3 roommates, ate rice and eggs, and after 14 months of hustling both physically and mentally, I launched Elevair Home, a boutique luxury home service firm designed for the elite. Every staff member I hired was trained in discretion, speed, and subtlety. We cleaned, yes, but also reorganized, restocked, reset. We removed stress from people's homes like ghosts, and we never left fingerprints. My first client was a real estate agent in Brentwood, then a hedge fund manager, then a celebrity couple whose marriage was hanging on by dental floss. I never advertised. Word of mouth carried us across coasts, then to London, then Dubai. By year 3, I had regional directors handling operations I no longer touched, and yet to my family I was still the cleaner. And that worked for me. Until last week when Inc. reached out for an exclusive feature, the silent founder of a billion-dollar shadow brand. The article would drop this Friday, yes, the same day as Dad's birthday dinner. Perfect. The sun dipped low on Friday evening as I pulled into the parking lot of Prima, The most overpriced steakhouse in town. A black Escalade sat parked out front, no doubt. Chelsea's new lease she'd financed with Dad's help. I stayed in my Toyota, kept it for show. People don't suspect power when the hubcaps are scratched. Inside the restaurant was buzzing. Low jazz expensive perfume. I walked in wearing a simple black wrap dress. Custom, of course, but nothing loud. I still played the part. Jade Chelsea leapt from her seat like she'd rehearsed it on time. Someone call the news. "Hi, Dad," I said, turning to him, his eyes skimmed over me. "Long day, huh? Still doing that cleaning thing?" He smirked. God, he loved that line. "Something like that," I replied, sliding into my seat. Mom barely looked up from her menu. The conversation swirled around me. Marcus, my brother, bragged about the new patio he'd built with Dad's contractor. Chelsea flashed her ring. Not an engagement, just a promise. Dad drank. Mom laughed too hard at mediocre stories. I kept my mouth shut. Let them talk over me like always. Then Chelsea said, "Hey, did anyone see what ink is dropping tomorrow? They're profiling some mystery entrepreneur, built $1 billion company in secret. Used to be a cleaner." I mean, how crazy is that? Marcus snorted. Probably some crypto scam. Dad didn't even look up. Whoever she is, doubt she kept it together. You know how these startups go? Flashy and then poof, gone. I took a slow sip of my wine. Chelsea turned to me. "So how's the dustbuster biz? Jade still mopping your way to the top?" I smiled. "It's growing," I said simply. And it was 10 offices, 8 countries, projected to cross 1-2 billion by Q4, but I said nothing else, just smiled. Because tomorrow morning the game would change publicly, permanently. And they'd finally know who they'd been mocking all along. Saturday morning arrived quietly, but my nerves buzzed like the start of a thunderstorm. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was nervous, but because I'd waited years for this moment. Years of pretending, smiling through insults, shrinking myself down so they wouldn't feel small in my shadow. But now, the mask was coming off. At exactly 8:55 a.m., I sat on the couch in my loft with a cup of coffee, my laptop open and logged into Inc. magazine's homepage, my dog Sage. A sleepy old lab mix curled beside me, completely unbothered by the world's impending shift. The feature was set to go live at 9:00 a.m. sharp. I didn't need the article to validate me. I didn't need my family to grovel or apologize. I just wanted them to see the version of me I had spent years building in silence, the version they never bothered to ask about. At 9:00 a.m., the homepage changed. Meet Jade Monroe, the billionaire behind the curtains. My heart pounded not with fear, but with clarity. The article opened with a full-screen photo of me standing in front of Elevare's newest HQ in Paris, dressed in cream trousers and a tailored blazer, smiling like someone who had nothing to hide anymore. The feature walked through my journey from janitor for hire to founder of a global luxury service brand. It included interviews with early clients, behind-the-scenes photos, revenue reports, and the kicker. Jade Monroe, Forbes, estimated net worth $17 billion. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just breathed. Because this wasn't just success, it was reclamation. I imagined the exact moment the article reached their screens. Chelsea probably scrolling Instagram while waiting for her almond milk latte. Marcus at the gym catching headlines on the treadmill screen. Dad reading business news between rounds of golf. Mom somewhere between a Pinterest recipe and Zillow browsing for homes she'd never afford. And then buzz. My phone lit up like a casino machine on fire. Chelsea, 9:07 a.m. Wait, what is this you, Mom? 9:09 a.m. Jade, sweetheart, why didn't you say anything? We're stunned. Marcus, 9:11 a.m. This can't be real. You built that. Dad, 9:16 a.m. Call me. No punctuation, classic. I let the messages stack up unread. I didn't owe them urgency. By noon, the article had gone viral. Comments poured in, DMs from old classmates. Industry leaders sharing praise. Reporters reaching out. 3 podcast invites. An email from a publisher asking if I'd ever considered writing a book. And amid the chaos, calm. It's funny what clarity feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. Like silence right after the rain. Around 4 p.m. I finally responded to the family group chat. Me? Yes, it's me. No. I didn't lie, I just didn't correct you when you assumed dinner tomorrow at my place. 6 p.m. sharp. My place. Not the one-bedroom apartment they thought I lived in. Not the one with the peeling countertops and hand-me-down toaster. That was just a decoy. I kept for optics used for staging social media posts and keeping up appearances. My real place was perched on the 40th floor of a luxury high-rise downtown floor-to-ceiling windows, a private elevator, a rooftop terrace with a view of the bay that made your chest ache. I rarely brought people here. I liked having one space untouched by judgment or expectations. But tomorrow, I would open the doors, not to impress them, but to show them who I'd always been underneath the label they stapled to my back. Sunday arrived golden and clear. By 5:45, everything was in place. I'd hired Elevare's top team to manage the dinner. I didn't lift a finger, I didn't need to. They knew how I liked things minimal, elegant, effortless. There were white orchids on the table, a handwritten menu at each setting. Candles lit, music low. Everything intentional. At 6:02 p.m., the elevator dinged. Chelsea walked in first. Her expression caught between awe and suspicion. "This is yours," she asked, spinning in place like a child. Marcus followed, eyes wide. "Whoa, what is this place?" Dad entered last, scanning the apartment like it owed him rent. "So you've been living here this whole time?" Mom stepped in quietly, setting her purse down on the marble console table. "It's beautiful, Jade." I just smiled. "Welcome." They sat at the dining table, each of them visibly unsure of how to act. For once, they couldn't lean on their usual assumptions. Their scripts didn't work here. Dinner began. Conversation was stiff. They tried small talk, throwing compliments like darts. "The risotto is fancy," Marcus said. "This wine," Mom added, holding her glass delicately, "tastes expensive." Dad remained silent until halfway through the main course. Then he finally looked at me and asked, "So, how long have you been doing this?" "The business, I mean." I set my fork down. 8 years. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That long? You never asked." I said, "Silence." Chelsea leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell us, Jade?" I looked at her carefully. "Would you have listened or just reminded me again to try admin work or marry someone stable?" She looked down at her plate. "You could have included us," Marcus mumbled. "I did," I said, voice calm. "You just didn't see it." I reached under the table and pulled out 4 slim envelopes, one for each of them, gold embossed with their names. No drama, just data. They opened them. Marcus's eyes darted over a printed email. My anonymous pitch to his investment firm from 5 years ago. Rejected, marked not scalable. Chelsea's letter contained screenshots of our last birthday exchange. Her handing me a $20 Starbucks card and saying, "Maybe you'll get your big break this year." Underneath it, a screenshot of the Elevare investor deck valued at $860 million at the time. Mom's envelope held photos of me in my first office, tiny, windowless, furnished with a folding chair and second-hand desk. Alongside it, a list of times I'd asked her for help, a loan, a letter of support, even just to come see the space. All declined. Dad's had only one thing, the ink feature printed and folded. He stared at it. "Why do this?" he asked. "Why now?" I looked at him, at all of them. "Because you spent years looking right through me," I said, "and now you can't." No raised voices. No slammed doors. Just truth laid bare. I stood, walked toward the window and looked out over the glittering skyline. They sat in silence. And I had never felt so seen. They left that night in near silence. No hugs, no empty love. No condescending reminders to stay humble, just the sound of elevator doors closing. And honestly, that was enough. For years, I'd walked into rooms where no one listened, where my voice disappeared under the weight of their assumptions, where silence was easier than fighting for space. I was never going to be given. But after that dinner, something shifted. Not just in them, in me. It was like someone had finally cracked a window in a suffocating room. That Monday morning, I walked into our San Francisco headquarters, our newest expansion hub, and every team member stood when I entered. I hated the attention, but accepted it with grace. Not because I needed admiration, but because I finally understood what it meant to be seen for what you built, not just what you were born into. We had 4 client onboarding meetings. A tech billionaire, a former prime minister, a world-famous author. Each one of them came to me because Elevare didn't just clean homes, we rebuilt sanity. Behind the scenes, in total silence, As I walked the halls later that afternoon, I stopped to glance at the framed timeline on the office wall. Elevair's milestones. First client. First million. First expansion. And at the end, blank space for what came next. Funny how the most powerful moments in life rarely come with fanfare. Just stillness, just knowing. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Chelsea, can we talk? I ignored it. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to hear her stumble through a performance she probably practiced in front of a mirror. Guilt isn't the same as growth. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the city outside lull me to sleep. By Wednesday, Chelsea had tried 3 more times. A phone call, a text asking to get coffee. A voice memo that I only played halfway through. Jade, I don't know how to say this. I guess I just didn't see it. Didn't see you, but I want to. I mean that. Please call me back. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I opened my email. There was a message from Harper & Lane, one of the largest publishing houses in the country. Subject: We'd love to help you tell your story. Inside an offer. A multi-6-figure book deal. Full creative control, ghostwriter optional, global distribution, and a title they already had in mind. Dust to Dynasty. The Jade Monroe story. I laughed, literally laughed out loud. It sounded so dramatic. Like a fairy tale told in boardrooms. They had no idea how many times I'd fallen asleep on mop buckets or cried in service closets or scrubbed toilets while trying to memorize SEO strategies from YouTube videos. But I responded. Not because I needed to be famous, because the right story told the right way could help the next woman working a job beneath her potential realize she didn't have to stay there. And maybe, just maybe, she'd stop waiting for validation and start moving in silence too. By the end of the week, Dad caved. I was sitting in my terrace garden tending to basil plants I'd somehow kept alive for 3 years when my phone rang. Dad. I answered on the 3rd ring. Jade. Hi. Silence. Then I was wrong. My heart didn't skip or leap or flutter. It stayed steady. I know, I said. Another pause. You've built something incredible, he added, voice rough like gravel. I never thought. You didn't want to think, I said gently, that was easier. He exhaled. That dinner, it shook me. The letters, the data, the proof. That was the point. He cleared his throat. Your mom cried. Said she missed it all. Said she doesn't know how to fix it. She doesn't have to fix it, I said. Just stop pretending nothing was broken. Then came the unexpected. We're planning something, he said slowly. For you, Sunday family only. At the lake house. The lake house, where they'd hosted Chelsea's engagement party, even though the engagement lasted less time than her gel manicure. The same house I hadn't been invited to in years. Not even for holidays. And you want me there? Why, I asked. To listen. To say what we didn't. No performances, no surprises, just real talk. I didn't respond right away. I looked out at the skyline instead. So much distance between who I was and who they thought they knew. But still, part of me wanted to see if they could meet me halfway. I'll come, I said. But only if we leave the performance at the door. No scripts. He said, Just us. Sunday arrived. I drove myself, of course. No staff, no driver, no symbolic Rolls Royce. Just me and a car that didn't scream status, because I'd already proven I didn't need volume to command a room. When I pulled into the gravel drive, memories hit like static nights spent reading under that porch light, hiding in my hoodie during family barbecues, pretending I was okay with being overlooked. The house looked the same. My family, though, not quite. They stood on the porch. Not all smiles, but not guarded either. Just uncertain. Vulnerable, maybe. Inside, things felt different. No decorations, no catered food, just homemade chili on the stove and awkward eye contact. Chelsea sat me down. I was horrible to you, she said. I thought you being quiet meant you didn't have anything to say. I didn't realize it meant you were choosing peace over performance. I said nothing, just listened. Marcus spoke next. You pitched me years ago. I read that email and rolled my eyes. I'm sorry. I thought I knew better. You didn't, I said, but now you do. Then came Mom, tears already welling in her eyes. I told myself you were strong and didn't need help, she said, voice shaking, but that was a lie. I didn't want to deal with your potential. It made me feel small. Her honesty landed like an anchor in the room. And then Dad. He stood, hands in pockets, staring at the floor. I taught you that success looked one way. The way I understood it. Titles. Suits, Ivy League schools. I never imagined it could come from bleach and grit and silence, but now I know better. And I see you, Jade. For the first time, I believed him. He wasn't just apologizing. He was changing. Not fast, not cleanly, but trying. And sometimes that's where healing starts. Not with perfection, but with effort. We ate in peace that night. Laughed awkwardly, remembered things that once felt impossible to talk about. No one asked for money. No one made passive-aggressive jokes. No one handed me coupons. And that felt like a small miracle. As I drove home under the quiet hush of twilight, I thought about how far I'd come not just in wealth but in self-respect. For years I wanted them to see me. Now I realized I just wanted me to see myself without shrinking to fit their stories. And finally, I did. I thought that once the truth was out, once my family finally saw who I really was, things would settle like dust after an explosion. But here's the thing about coming into the light after years in the shadows. People don't just see you. They start reaching for you, some with curiosity, others with claws. The week after the lake house dinner, my face was everywhere. News anchors dissected my journey like it was a case study in miracles. TikTok stitched together clips from my Inc. interview, layering them with motivational music. LinkedIn turned me into a poster child for entrepreneurial resilience, and Instagram. Oh, Instagram crowned me CEO Cinderella. I smiled through it at first because I understood what it meant to become a symbol. But symbols aren't people, and people have limits. By Thursday, I'd received over 400 partnership requests, 70 podcast invites, and 6 different unsolicited pitches for a docu-series. A Hollywood producer left me a voice message that ended with, "I'm telling you, Jade, this has streaming rights written all over it." Everyone wanted a piece of me now. But I'd spent too many years giving away my time, energy, and self-respect to people who didn't see value in me until the world did. So this time I was careful with my yes. That Friday, I met with our legal team and personal security advisors. Not because I felt unsafe, but because visibility comes with shadows, the kind that don't announce themselves. My assistant Ray handed me a folder. Inside was a report on recent media inquiries. A few red flags. People digging. Someone even contacted my old roommates from back when I shared a 2-bedroom walk-up with roaches and ramen. "You okay?" Ray asked. I nodded. Just annoyed that now they care. "Want me to block the press for a while?" I shook my head. "Let them come. Just make sure they know I'm not here to perform." She grinned. "I'll draft a no BS press protocol." God, I loved her. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I returned to the first home I ever cleaned under Elevere. Adelaide Brooks's estate. Her son had reached out after seeing my article. Said his mother passed 2 years ago, asked if I wanted to visit. No press, no fanfare, just closure. I went alone. The house hadn't changed much, still ivy-covered, still regal in its quiet defiance of time. Inside, the smell of aged books and lavender soap hit me like a wave. And then I saw it. On the small side table in the study, still there like it never left 0 to 1. The book she handed me all those years ago. The first domino. Beside it, a letter. "Jade, if you're reading this, you've become what I always knew you could." I didn't need to live long enough to see it. I just needed to believe it before you did. Don't let the spotlight blur your compass. Some people chase the world to prove they're worthy. Others become so rooted in who they are that the world starts chasing them. You were always the second kind. Adelaide. I stood there, letter trembling in my hand, and for the first time since all this began, I cried, not because I was sad, not because I felt regret, but because someone saw me before the headlines, before the valuation, before the articles and the interviews and the perfect lighting. She saw the girl beneath the grime and believed she was already gold. By Monday, the noise returned. Marcus called asking for advice. Wanted help building his own brand. Chelsea texted asking if I'd speak at a women's leadership event she was hosting. Just a small panel, but it would mean the world. Even my mother sent a screenshot of a magazine featuring me and added, "The girls at book club are all obsessed. I told them I helped you learn about color palettes." That one made me laugh. But the truth is, I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. They weren't used to me having boundaries, weren't used to hearing no. So when I said, "Sorry, I'm not available for that," and left it at that, no apology, no explanation, they froze because they were used to me shrinking, not standing. And let me tell you, standing changes the air in every room you enter. Later that week, I agreed to one interview. Just one. A global summit hosted by an anchor I respected. Zoe Ash. She was known for her realness. No fluff, no clickbait. We filmed in my Manhattan office. Clean white walls, warm lighting. No excessive branding. Just 2 chairs and a small table with water. "So Jade," she said, after the intros, "now that the world knows who you are, what do you know that you didn't know before?" I paused, then smiled. That being underestimated was my greatest advantage. She raised an eyebrow. "How so?" I got to build without noise, without pressure, without performative expectations. No one interrupted my process. They didn't think I mattered, so I became unstoppable in silence. Zoe leaned in. "And now," I said, "I'm intentional, not invisible." The clip went viral, not because I said anything new, but because I said it with calm certainty, like someone who no longer needed permission to be powerful. That night, I sat in bed reading through the flood of DMs and emails from women around the world. One message stood out. From Anne Maria Builds. Subject: I read your story. I'm a janitor in Boston. I print marketing flyers during my breaks. You gave me hope I didn't know I was allowed to have. I replied instantly. Hope isn't something you wait for. It's something you plant. And girl, sounds like you've already started watering yours. Because I remembered what it felt like to hope in secret, to dream in silence, to feel like ambition was a foreign language everyone around you refused to translate. But now I had the tools, the map, and I planned to leave the door wide open for others like me. Just before sleep pulled me under, I got one last text. "Data, your mom wants to host a family dinner at your place if you're open to it. Says she finally wants to learn how Elevair runs." I stared at the message. Was it real interest or guilt? With good manners. Either way, I had the power to decide, so I replied with the most radical thing I'd ever said to my parents. "Maybe, but only if you're coming to learn not to lead." There was no response. Not yet. But I was okay with that, because silence no longer meant absence. Sometimes it was just the sound of someone realizing they had finally been invited into a story that was never about them to begin with. I didn't hear back from Dad for 2 days after that text. And honestly, that was fine. Because what I'd said, "only if you're coming to learn not to lead," wasn't just a clever line, it was a contract. A line in the sand. I didn't plan on smudging just to keep things comfortable. By Wednesday afternoon, a new message came through. "Dad will come, we'll listen, no lectures, just dinner." I read it twice. Short, direct, almost cautious. Which, coming from a man who once told me I'd end up folding shirts at a mall kiosk if I didn't get serious, was progress. Small, wobbly progress, but progress all the same. So I said yes, and this time the dinner would be different. No team, no chef, no wine pairings. Just me. My kitchen and a few family members finally trying to step into a story they never bothered to read. I made mushroom risotto, partly because it was simple, mostly because it reminded me of Nana. She used to make it on rainy Sundays barefoot, dancing to Marvin Gaye in the kitchen like life didn't owe her anything. She was the first person to ever say out loud, "You don't have to be loud to take up space, baby. Just be unshakable." I heard her voice a lot lately, especially when I started doubting whether reconnecting with my family was worth the effort. They arrived on time. Chelsea was wearing jeans. No designer labels this time. Marcus brought a bottle of wine with a post-it that read, "I googled what pairs with risotto, Mom." Wore a cardigan. I actually liked Dad. Well, Dad was quiet, which might have been the loudest thing about him that night. They stepped into my apartment like people entering a temple they weren't sure they were allowed to worship in. "Smells incredible," Mom said, eyes scanning the room. "You cook too." "I eat, don't I?" said, stirring the pot. That earned a half smile. We sat down around my kitchen island. No place settings, no PowerPoint slides, no glossy envelopes with receipts. Just food. Real food. And maybe for once, real conversation. We ate quietly for a few minutes before Marcus spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about that email you sent me, the one I turned down." I looked at him but didn't say anything. Let him sit with it. I guess I assumed if it didn't come from someone with credentials, it wasn't legit. "You mean a degree?" I said. He nodded. "Yeah." I leaned back in my seat. The funny thing, that's exactly why it worked. No one expected anything from me. I didn't have to impress investors or survive pitch rooms. I just had to solve a problem no one else was willing to get their hands dirty with. Chelsea sipped her water, unusually quiet. "We used to joke that you were the family minimalist. You had no stuff, no updates, no Instagram stories. Now I know it wasn't because you had nothing going on. It was because you were building in peace. I gave her a small nod. Silence doesn't always mean stuck. Sometimes it's strategy. Mom reached for her fork, then stopped. I need to say something. We all turned toward her. I think I used your quietness as an excuse not to get involved, she said slowly. It made it easier. Pretending you were fine, pretending you weren't hurt. That way I didn't have to look at my own guilt. Dad looked up at her surprised. She continued. But when I read that article, when I saw your face, your company, I realized how far you had to go without any of us cheering you on, and that... Her voice cracked. That's something I'll always carry. No one spoke. Not even Dad. And that in itself was a miracle. I could feel something unspooling inside me. Not anger, not even forgiveness, just release. Like a pressure valve had finally been turned. I didn't tell you. Because I didn't want to fight for your belief, I said gently. I needed to prove it to myself first. Dad put down his fork. He looked tired. Older than I remembered. You know, he said when you dropped out to care for your Nana, I told everyone you were wasting your life. But the truth is, I was ashamed. Not of you, of me, because I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have stayed. I blinked. That hit deeper than I expected. He looked at me, not with pride or apology, but with something resembling reverence. You're stronger than all of us, he said. And I'm finally okay saying that out loud. For the first time in my adult life, I believed him. After dinner, Chelsea helped me do dishes. Did you know she said rinsing a pan that people are posting quotes from you on Pinterest now? Like you're Oprah or something? I laughed. Great. That's what I need to be memeified. She grinned. There's one I actually really liked. It said, silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Stole that from myself, I said. Good, keep doing it. We looked at each other for a second. Not as sisters who tolerated each other out of obligation, but as women trying to rebuild a bridge with new wood. You know, she said, I thought success would make you harder, more distant, but you seem softer somehow. I wiped my hands on a towel. I'm not softer, I'm just not hiding anymore. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Later that night, as I stood on my balcony, the city blinking below like a heartbeat, my phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, I know it's late, but would you look over something? I'm building a startup. It's rough, but I want your eyes on it. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, me, send it over, I'll give you notes. No fluff. Marcus. That's exactly what I want. And weirdly, I believed him. That weekend, I flew to Chicago to open our newest Elevair branch. The ribbon cutting was small. No press. Just clients, staff, and a few quiet hugs from people who finally understood that dignity didn't come from how loudly you introduced yourself, but from how you treated people when no one was watching. I gave a short speech. Nothing rehearsed, just from the gut. And when I finished, a woman in the back raised her hand. How do you stay grounded? She asked. With all this success, I smiled. I remember what it felt like to be invisible, I said. And I never want to become the kind of person who makes others feel that way. The room went quiet. And in that silence, I felt more powerful than I ever had in my life. Not because I had made it, but because I hadn't let it make me bitter. It had been 3 months since the article dropped, 2 months since the lake house dinner, and exactly 1 week since I signed a deal to acquire a boutique tech startup whose founder once told me to my face, cleaning is what people do when they don't have ambition. He'd sold it to me for half its value after months of cash burn. I didn't gloat. I just signed the paperwork, shook his hand and said, thanks for believing I'd stay small. That's the thing about people who underestimate you. They never see the checkmate until the board's already empty. A few days later, I visited Nana's grave again. It was early morning. The grass still wet with dew. A light breeze moved through the trees like her breath still lingered in the air. I brought her a copy of Forbes folded neatly with a post-it on the front. You were right. I sat on the bench beside her stone and pulled out a thermos of tea chamomile, her favorite. You know, I whispered, you told me once that real wealth isn't measured in money, but in how free you feel when you wake up. I looked out across the quiet hills. I think I'm finally free. I left the magazine tucked beneath her stone, pressed a kiss to my fingers, and touched her name. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled. Because grief softens when you build something in its name. Back in the city, things changed again. Not in the loud ways, in the subtle ones. Chelsea invited me to her birthday dinner. No sarcasm, no digs, just an invite that said, you matter, and I want you there. Marcus sent me a draft of his business plan every other week, sometimes with a note that read, rip it apart. Mom started calling not to critique, but to ask how I was feeling. Even Dad. Well, Dad still wasn't the warmest man, but he tried. He showed up, and sometimes that's more than enough. One night we sat in my living room, the TV on mute, while I answered emails. He broke the silence. You know, when you were a kid, I thought you were too sensitive, always reading, always quiet. I used to think that meant weak. I looked over at him but said nothing. He stared ahead as if talking to himself. But I see now, he continued, quiet doesn't mean weak. It means you're paying attention. And you paid attention to everything we didn't. Then he stood, patted my shoulder awkwardly, and left. It wasn't an apology, but it was real. And sometimes real is better. A month later, I finally said yes to the book deal. I called it Built in Silence, because that's what it was. Not a revenge story, not a Cinderella fantasy, just the truth, layered and raw. I wrote it myself. Every chapter. No ghostwriters, no filters. Chapter 1 started with a mop and ended with a vision. Chapter 10 started with a dinner and ended with a reckoning. And the final chapter. It started with a girl no one believed in and ended with a woman who no longer needed them to. I dedicated the book to Nana and to every quiet girl who was told she was too small to dream big. On launch day, I didn't go to any parties. I took Sage, my dog, and drove to the beach just outside the city. We walked along the shore until the noise in my head went quiet, because that's how I wanted to remember this moment. Not in flashing lights, not through red carpets or champagne toasts, but through peace. Because peace is what I was always chasing when I stayed quiet, when I didn't fight for their approval, when I let them laugh instead of explaining myself, when I walked out of rooms I didn't belong in without making a scene. People always think revenge is loud, that it comes with slamming doors and dramatic exits. But the truth is, the most powerful kind of revenge doesn't sound like rage. It sounds like freedom. A few weeks later, I got an invitation, not from my family, not from the press, but from the local community college where I took my first business class at night after scrubbing houses for 12 hours. They wanted me to speak at graduation. I said yes. And when I stepped onto that stage in front of rows of students who were juggling work bills, babies, and their own invisible battles, I didn't tell them to hustle harder or dream bigger. I told them this. Don't wait for applause. Don't beg to be understood. Just start quietly. While they underestimate you. Build without their attention. Protect your momentum. And when they finally look up, let your success introduce you. The students stood. Some cried. I saw myself in all of them. The invisible ones. And I knew this was what legacy looked like. Not trending. Not viral, but changing the story for someone who needed proof that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. It's been a year since the article, 2 since I forgave them. 10 since I pushed my first mop across someone else's marble floor. And I'm still building. Not for recognition, not for payback, but for peace. Because I learned that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about finally feeling right in your own skin. Some nights, I sit on my rooftop, barefoot, legs dangling over the edge. City lights buzzing below like static. I drink tea, I write in my journal, and I remind myself, I didn't win because I made more money. I didn't win because I got loud. I won because I never needed their spotlight to know I was shining. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not showing them who you are, but becoming it anyway without needing them to notice. Story 2. The new CEO, Damon Reeves, got up, straightened his cufflinks, and cleared his throat after I had just concluded my quarterly presentation, which was a well-planned, data-driven analysis of how we had surpassed the $50 million sales milestone. With a smile that stopped short of his eyes, he remarked, I have one more announcement to make before we wrap up. It has to do with the reorganization of our leadership. I went cold. The last slide, a joyful graphic captioned Q2 revenue surge. A record-breaking quarter appeared behind me while my hands remained hovering over the trackpad. Damon approached the front of the room at a leisurely pace. Every member of our executive team sat silently. A few appeared perplexed. As of right now, some of the people who had been muttering in the corners would not look me in the eyes. Damon went on. Olivia is resigning from her position as Chief Operations Officer. We are really appreciative of her efforts, which have been substantial. A pause. However, as we enter a new stage of aggressive expansion, we want more flexible decision-making and less operational bottlenecking. Olivia's strategic discipline is her strength, but we must be leaner and faster. There was an odd quiet in the room. Not surprised, quiet, feeling ashamed. Quiet. Damon remarked nonchalantly. I think you said exactly what you said last week. We should invest in development and hire more carefully before scaling too fast. There is a place for that type of prudence, but not just now. I appreciate your service. As though it clarified everything, he turned to the team. I grinned as I looked at this man who had only been with the firm for 3 months. Thank you for the clarity, I said plainly. No protest, no tears, no drama, nothing but quiet. Damon then took over the projector and started a slide with the title, Phase 2, Structural Optimization, and I moved aside. Just like I was going to lunch, I walked back to my workplace. They were unaware. They were unaware of my previous actions. I had sensed a change 2 months prior when the board had selected Damon. He had experience with fast turnover venture capital businesses where spreadsheets and ego, not people, were used to make judgments. From the beginning, he viewed me as a barrier to be destroyed rather than as a collaborator. 6 years prior, I had established the company's initial product line. I had developed the operations manual, assembled the crew, and stepped in as our original CEO when he resigned for health reasons. The ship didn't sink because of me. I didn't request compliments. I requested loyalty. I didn't get either. Rather, I saw alterations. Uninvited meetings, plans that were overturned without debate, and an increasing feeling that Damon was writing a story without me in it. Then one afternoon, I heard his assistant on the line setting up a lunch meeting with my vendor, our biggest supplier with whom I had personally negotiated 5-year contracts. He explained to the vendor's representative that the plan is to gradually phase Olivia out. It will facilitate the process. I had already started to take precautions against their attempts to erase me. I knew something they didn't, and I had seen the signs. Kronos Core Systems. Our largest vendor had been having financial difficulties. I knew they were seeking a buyout because I had been surreptitiously going over their quarterly filings. It was a golden opportunity. I therefore got in touch with a former graduate school friend. We made an offer through a holding company I had secretly established the previous year, and he is now a private equity partner in Boston. It was a discreet, lawful, and silent acquisition. Damon was informed in a courteous but firm manner that any correspondence would now be routed through the holding company's new leadership. When he called their CEO to pressure me out of vendor negotiations, he never connected the dots. Because I was buying the ground while Damon was sharpening his axe, I didn't flinch when he announced my termination in front of the team, grinning as though he had just removed the final barrier to his valuable Phase 2. He continued to stand. I slowly packed my things back in my office family portrait. Last Christmas, I received a brass fountain pen from my team, a leather-bound copy of the Lean Startup, still full of my margin notes. I placed everything neatly in a box, then turned to face the glass wall. Through it, I could see Damon laughing with the CFO. I smiled again softly. This time tomorrow, the emails would start, the contracts would change, and in 3 days, panic would replace that smug confidence because the heartbeat of the company's supply chain, the one vendor they couldn't replace, was now owned by me, and I was done being quiet. Friday morning, I received a polite but cold email from HR, subject transition plan. Olivia, please complete the enclosed checklist before 5 p.m. today. We'll arrange for your severance and benefits transfer accordingly. Also, Damon asked if you'd be willing to draft a knowledge transfer document for your replacement, Best Camille People Operations. I chuckled. The man fires me in front of my team, then asks for a favor, like we're exchanging birthday cards. Still, I responded with a short message. Camille, I'll ensure all deliverables are documented. Regards. Olivia. It wasn't just professionalism, it was strategy. Every file I handed over would be clean, precise, and just incomplete enough to make them reliant on a partner they no longer controlled. And that partner, Chrono Core Systems, they still hadn't put the pieces together. At 10:17 a.m., I got a call from Michelle, my attorney. They've started sniffing. I said, she said, a junior procurement manager at your old company reached out to Chrono Core asking why they haven't signed off on a new delivery schedule. And we responded formally. Cited the recent acquisition and said the new leadership team will be handling future discussions directly. They'll escalate it by Monday. I predicted, especially when they realize how central Chrono Core is to the Phase 2 rollout. They've got a dependency they didn't even think to vet. Michelle said, it almost amused, congratulations, you own their supply chain. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of framed awards I hadn't packed yet. Most were for operations excellence, cost savings, strategic procurement, all earned under my watch. They used to be proud of me until I became inconvenient. That evening, I had dinner with Clara, one of the few people at the company I still trusted. She slid into the booth at our usual wine bar, eyes wide. Everyone's talking about it. Damon was cocky all afternoon, but around 3 p.m., his mood shifted. Something spooked him. I stirred my drink. Was it about Chrono Core? She nodded. They were supposed to finalize next quarter's contract this week, but the call got bounced. Legal said something about a change in ownership structure. And now, Damon's demanding answers. I raised an eyebrow, so he's finally paying attention. Clara leaned in. He doesn't know. Does he? Not just yet? What are you going to do? I grinned. Slow and deliberate. Nothing. I already did it. On Saturday, I received a request for a meeting, not from Damon, from their procurement lead, Trevor. Hi, Olivia. I know things ended awkwardly, but I was hoping to speak briefly about the Chrono Core contract. There seems to be some confusion internally, and you're the only one who handled those negotiations. Would you be open to a quick call? Trevor? I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, but because it wasn't my job anymore. Instead, Michelle sent a formal letter on behalf of the holding company Verity Partners LLC, informing Techline, the parent company, that all further negotiations regarding Chrono Core services would go through Veritas. New client relations guided me. Sunday evening, just after 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown caller Damon Reeves. One missed call. Voicemail. One new message. I didn't listen to it. Michelle had warned me not to allow your quiet be the loudest thing in the room, she'd stated, and she was correct. Monday morning hit like a thunderclap at Techline HQ. I woke early, prepared my coffee, and opened up the internal dashboards I still had temporary access to through the vendor portal in red unconfirmed fourth quarter supplier. Contracts pending clearance. That pending status would halt 3 significant product lines if left unresolved. At 8:02 a.m., Clara texted Damon dashed into the 8 a.m. All hands. No one was aware of what was taking place. By 10:30 a.m., he appears to have not slept. LinkedIn was booming. There had been a press release. With the purchase, Chrono Core Systems announced a new chapter in client engagement and operational leadership under Verity Partners, LLC. Our goal is still to give our esteemed clients the best corporate solutions available. Although my name was not mentioned, everyone who knew me was aware of it. Damon sent me a one-line email at 11:12 a.m. We must speak immediately. I sent it on to Michelle. 10 minutes later, she called, giggling. He's in a panic. At last, he understood who had purchased the kingdom. He believed he was king. Furthermore, I hadn't even started to play my next card yet. Chrono Core provided more than simply software parts. They were in charge of Techline's most recent project's data architecture. Without Chrono Core bespoke data libraries, Damon had risked his whole CEO reputation on an AI-powered operations hub. The project would fail before it was even launched. Footsteps echoing past my door in the corridor outside my flat. Still seated near the doorway, I took a quick look at my packaged office supplies. I wasn't sure if I should donate it or unpack it. Since I was officially no longer employed by Techline, it was no longer relevant. However, they were effective for me in practice. The hurricane has made landfall in Techline by Tuesday morning. I could view it without inside access. I only needed to observe how LinkedIn was shaken. Her status had been subtly changed to open to work by a project manager. The Chrono Core purchase news was published by 2 AI division engineers with ambiguous comments that read, "Big industry moves ahead. One door closes, another opens." However, it was a calendar invite from Damon's aide that started the actual conflict. Topic 9 a.m. Emergency leadership meeting required presence. I received a text from Clara at 8:44 a.m. He's perspiring, literally. We all saw him enter. He appears to have just been given a blood-stained letter of resignation. Into my coffee cup, I grinned. This was not a case of personal revenge. I had no desire to see Damon's disintegration for its own sake. However, I wanted to see the board recognize the type of mistake they had made in giving the keys to a man who was blind to 3 moves ahead. Michelle and I completed our official Techline licensing request that morning. It wasn't mean. It was simply pricey. In order to optimize for scalability and expansion, Chrono Core had previously provided services under a volume discount basis that I personally negotiated. That model was no longer an option. What the tech line would now provide was a pay-as-you-go model that was invoiced on a monthly basis and included a premium for help integration data hosting and, most importantly, access to the proprietary AI learning modules that served as the foundation for their next-generation operations hub. To appreciate the terms, Michelle read them out loud once more. Standard enterprise prices plus exclusivity protections and a 22% surcharge for bespoke dependencies, and of course, public recognition of the new ownership of ChronoCore. Before lunch, let's send it. They'll have ample time to lose their appetites, I remarked. Clara buzzed on my phone that afternoon. Olivia, it was discovered by the engineers. ChronoCore is yours. Slack is being flown through. Damon is furious. With the door shut, he gathered the whole DevOps team for a secret meeting. 2 directors just asked me whether you were recruiting. A short while later, I started typing a response but didn't submit it. I'd rather let the uncertainty do the heavy lifting. In the meantime, TechLine's legal department formally responded to Michelle, recognizing our offer but declining it. They wanted to talk about possible other terms for licensing. Translation: they hoped I would blink since they couldn't afford it. I didn't. As stated in our offer, Michelle instead sent a brief, polite message. Unless a sizable ownership interest or public purchase bid is included, these parameters cannot be negotiated. If TechLine would rather look for other providers, we can understand. No additional vendors were present. Not only was ChronoCore their supplier, their infrastructure was the problem. Changing office chairs wasn't the same thing. Rebuilding what we had created would take at least 18 months. They also didn't have that much time. That evening, I saw the construction team completing the glass walls on our new strategy lab. As I strolled into my new office at Verde's downtown site, ChronoCore's updated HQ, I observed the group assembling tech displays and whiteboards. Additionally, I had a sensation that I hadn't felt in months, a sense of belonging. Once more, my phone buzzed. Unknown figure, I got the voicemail. I pressed the play button. This is Damon. Olivia. I believe that a fresh start is necessary. I'm not sure what your ultimate goal is, but you're endangering a lot of people. Those who stood with you for many years. Just consider that. This was not you. I shook my head at the conceit cloaked in phony compassion. I had endangered others in front of a whole executive team. This man had dismissed me. In an attempt to increase productivity, he had pushed through rash growth plans, reduced funding for onboarding and QA, and removed remote flexibility. Then, as top developers began to go, they blamed me. He was the victim number all of a sudden. Damon didn't care about the employees. The board was causing him anxiety. It was verified by Clara the following morning. He attempted to portray the vendor position as an unanticipated shift in the market. The board refused to accept it. A thorough assessment of supplier dependencies was requested. He ducked. Then audit counsel was called in. This is rapidly coming apart. He's probably aware that he's finished. My email pinging at 12 years. Richard Alvarez, chair of the Tech Line board, has asked for quick help. Dr. Monroe. I would want to schedule a private meeting as soon as possible on behalf of Tech Line's board of directors. We are examining how the present leadership has handled strategic alliances, and we recognize that you could have information that would be helpful to the board's evaluation. Tell us, please. An ideal moment to talk. Now, I said, that was interesting. I would be pleased to schedule a time later this week. Mr. Alvarez, the morning of Thursday or Friday would be ideal. Tell me what works best for your schedule, please. With due respect. Olivia Monroe. Verity Partners Managing Partner. I reclined in my chair and gazed at the framed quotation on my shelf as I pressed the submit button. A present from one of my Tech Line engineers led. In a way that your future self won't have to regret. Since I had gained power and the game wasn't done, I didn't have to apologize for Damon's political gamesmanship. Bright and frosty. Thursday morning came with a sense of fitting sharpness in the air. I meticulously accessorized with a sapphire ring, silver cufflinks, and a blue pantsuit with sleek lines. I had lost my granny. I don't work for you, but you'll wish I did, was the implication of the outfit. The Tech-Lined board had set up a private boardroom on the 32nd level of the Halliburton Tower for what they called a secret off-site review. And I entered in at precisely 9 in the morning. I received a pleasant greeting from the receptionist. They're expecting you inside, Dr. Monroe. The board chairman, Richard Alvarez, got up to welcome me. Olivia, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time. I shook his hand and responded, of course. A carafe of coffee sat undisturbed on the credenza in the dark wood-paneled and silent room. The table was occupied by 6 board members. Their facial expressions ranged from uneasy to indifferent. They had no idea how I would arrive. Furious, bitter, smug. I provided tranquility instead. I am aware that you have requested information on the coronavirus issue. I started. Richard gave a nod. It's gotten worse than we expected. I thought it may. On the table, I set a stylish leather folder. A sequence of events, emails, letters, and financial filings are all included here, and they all attest to the fact that 3 weeks ago, ChronoCore was completely bought by Verity Partners. We presently hold the data modules and are the exclusive supplier of your AI systems architecture, which powers more than 60% of your next-generation deployment. There was silence, so I went on. Since I was no longer working for Techline at the time of the acquisition, there isn't a conflict of interest legally, only a lack of awareness on the side of your existing leadership regarding operational risk. A gray-suited board member leaned forward. Why wasn't this flagged by Damien? Maybe he didn't anticipate it. So I said evenly, that touched down, I saw them move around in their chairs. Richard cleared his throat. He informed us that ChronoCore had overextended and that internal politics were the cause of the vendor interruption. I gave a head shake. For the first time in 5 years, ChronoCore is more stable. Damon's belief that eliminating institutional knowledge was the best course of action is what makes it shaky. I hesitated, then whispered, slow people aren't always the bottleneck. It's the person who is unaware of what they are concealing. I had a meeting with my new executive team later that day at the Veritas headquarters. We were going over the revised licensing agreement's final provisions. They were now urging Techline to sign generous, Michelle said. To lessen the impact, we even offered a 6-month grace period at their previous pricing tier. That's not how they'll see it. I said, it's fair though. Punishment is not our purpose. Our goal is to establish a standard and safeguard our goods. Eli, our CTO, displayed a real-time dashboard with incoming customer questions since the press release across the table. 12 enterprise-level organizations have contacted us, he added. Several Techline rivals have inquired about switching to our platform. I studied the list. 2 names quickly sprang to mind. At Techline, I pursued those clients for years before being told they were unreachable. They were rapping on my door now. The board convened an emergency executive session by Friday. Clara texted me to keep me informed. Damon is said to not make it through the weekend. His calendar access has been revoked. There are lawyers engaged. Fun side note, he just discovered that you were cloned on the final documentation repository by the DevOps team before you departed. Timestamps are applied to the audit trails. It demonstrates that throughout his unraveling, you were acting in good faith. I gazed at the word as it unraveled. I wasn't happy about it. It provided closure. Retaliation wasn't the point here. This has to do with acknowledgement about being told you're in the way and shoved aside. It was about showing them what occurred when they fired the lady who had forged every partnership, read every line of code, and trained half of the current team after 6 years of starting from nothing. I got another message that night right before I shut down my laptop for the weekend. Dr. Monroe is awaiting an official answer to Richard Alvarez's license proposal. The board has looked over Verity Partners' proposal. We are willing to agree to the parameters as stated, which include the 6-month transition period, the revised pricing model, and the recognition of the new ownership. For the way your departure was handled, we also want to apologize. Although we acknowledge that this won't alter the past, we hope it will pave the way for a future relationship that is more civil and professional. We appreciate you taking the time to remind us of the qualities of genuine leadership. I read it twice and again I sent it on to Michelle. She responded right away. That's about as near as you'll come to a corporate confession. Watching the lights flash over the skyline below, I reclined in my chair. People were hurrying, pursuing, climbing, and me in the bustling metropolis. I had stopped ascending. I was already here. The morning of Monday began in silence. Not loud enough. The quiet that precedes the roof collapsing. With coffee in hand, I reached the charity's offices shortly before 8 a.m. and checked my email. There was a deluge of press requests, internal updates, and nighttime notifications. The narrative had collapsed. In the corporate shuffle, the CEO was fired amid a vendor problem. Damon Reeves is removed from the tech clean board. Tech blogs, financial news, and even a LinkedIn trend under New Leadership Matters all carried the headline. I looked for names I knew and clicked on the article. According to a source close to the board, Damon's failure to evaluate important supplier risks and the sudden demise of Chrono Core had put several product lines in peril and irreparably damaged the company's reputation. He was fired with immediate effect. Clara verified it in less than 1 hour. It's true. At 7 a.m., Damon cleaned his desk. No drama, no speech. On his way out, he didn't even look at me. Richard Donovan is the CEO in the interim. Prior to their takeover, he oversaw operations at Iron Core Complete. Tidier, to set the AI operations hub apart from Phase 2, they are renaming it. Internally, many are referring to it as the Ghost Project. She added a gif of someone dousing a fire with water after that. I grinned. I didn't feel victorious, though, despite all of this mayhem. Even if Damon's downfall had been predictable, what happened next was more important. So I felt solid and determined. I entered our product lab for a team debrief at 11 in the morning. A technical rollout was being prepared by our engineers for new corporate clients, many of whom had contacted us after seeing TechLine's missteps. Before we began, our CTO, Eli, grabbed me aside. He said, "You won't believe this. A draft of the public license agreement was supplied by TechLine. In fact, they mentioned your name." I blinked. "You're kidding." "Not by any means. They composed Olivia Monroe, invented the technology Verity. Partners is the exclusive source for licensing in the forefront. Legal had to push it through." I gazed at my name on the page. Official unquestionably becoming public was like taking a breath for the first time after being submerged for months. "It is the first time they have stated it." I muttered, "Not once. Not at the time I developed the system. Not at launch. In spite of the initial 1 million users. They're saying it now," Eli said. Quite loud. We reviewed the incoming migration requests in a private strategy discussion on Tuesday. Our new architecture was requested to be demoed by 12 former TechLine clients. 3 of them had been regarded as accounts that could not be touched when I was employed there. Before I could conclude my pitch, executives would reject the proposal. They were knocking now, though. They suddenly understood what I had been saying, not because of a fancy deck or shrewd marketing. The job was more valuable than the brand. I got a call that afternoon from someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Layla Grant. She was among the few other prominent female leaders of TechLine in my childhood. Driven, intelligent, aspirational, and sympathetic. Before she was pushed out 2 years ahead of me, we had worked side by side. "When there is another realignment, I've been following this whole affair," Olivia remarked. "You're not aware of the impact it has had on women in technology, particularly those over 40. I remained silent for a while, not knowing how to react. "Not only did you win," Layla went on, "you demonstrated that you can outthink someone without lowering yourself to their level, and that patience and dignity can coexist with strategy. It's strong and uncommon." I thought about what she said long after we hung up. Considering that this was the unexpected impact, it was more than just a return. A message was at issue. You don't have to be the bad guy to fight back. TechLine formally announced to the whole organization on Wednesday that it has established a strategic deal with Verity Partners to maintain access to the Chronos Core platform. As we develop under the new leadership, we are dedicated to preserving operational excellence. A silent line that called my name was buried at the bottom. Just facts without any adjectives or other details. It was sufficient. At the same time, our marketing team at Verity was putting the last touches on a keynote address I had been asked to give at the Global Technology Leadership Forum the next month. The title, "When You Disprove the System's Assertion That You Are Replaceable." I came home that night to see a handwritten message in my mailbox. No address for return. There was a plain card inside. One sentence has turned into the tale I tell my daughter when she feels inadequately strong. No signature, no name. I simply allowed myself to experience it while holding the card to my chest, nor arrogance nor revenge. Just some clarification. It had nothing to do with what they had stolen from me. It had to do with the fact that I had taken back my name, my value, my job. I wasn't finished yet either. A year later, as the early light flowed over the polished floor, I entered Veritas offices after packing my belongings in a simple cardboard box and moving out of the tech lines. Glass Tower. It seemed like a silent accomplishment. Not much fanfare, not a word. As I walked to my office, I could only hear the soft click of my heels and the steady hum of a business that I had completely rebuilt. From the strategy room, Eli motioned me down. He smiled and motioned me over, saying, "You're going to want to see this." When I entered, our analytics dashboard was mounted on the wall and was navigating through real-time customer data. It was difficult to ignore the numbers. 98% of clients are retained. Onboardings for new enterprises. 14 for the most recent quarter. Revenue increased by 31% annually. Then Eli mentioned the most pleasing number: tech line's market share is expected to drop by 27%. 9 out of their top 20 previous accounts have migrated to Verity infrastructure. According to Eli, they initially attempted to minimize it. Investors, however, have questions, and now at last they are responding. He switched the screen to show me the official statement that had just been placed on TechLine's investor relations website, and I blinked in response. We admit that last year's difficulties were caused in part by strategic errors, such as the poor management of important alliances. We also acknowledge the crucial role that past CEOs like Olivia Munro had in creating the operational frameworks that still influence the industry today. They didn't simply say it in private or mumble an apology in public. My work with my name printed on it. I leaned on the table and remained silent for a while. "It's not everything, but it's something," Eli said after observing me. "It's sufficient. I don't need credit," I said. Truth was what I needed. I looked over our legal team's most recent reports later that day. 3 further license contracts were completed. One of them had been the oldest partner of tech. Lane completely switched to our system now. Soon later, I received a message from Michelle. They will attempt to buy time by implementing fresh PR efforts, new leadership, and new branding. However, the fundamental issue remains. The folks who laid their foundation were forgotten, and you never raised your voice to remind them. I didn't respond right away. I simply sat there and read her message again, giving it time to sink in. After all, wasn't that it? Every tactic, every tactful move, every instance in which I maintained my composure when they thought I would lose it. Ego was not the issue. It was meant to demonstrate that elegance and strength are not incompatible. While strolling around the silent hallways of the charity that evening, I came upon a framed plaque close to the entrance. It read one that I instantly recognized but had not authorized. The product isn't the true legacy of invention. It is made feasible by the persons involved. My name appeared beneath it in tiny form. I stood there looking at the reflection of the hallway lights in the glass for a long time. My phone then buzzed in the pocket of my coat. Clara had left a message. "I wanted to let you know that Monday is my official start date. I appreciate you leaving the door open. I feel as though I'm returning home." I grinned. One of the final people to exit the tech line was Clara. Despite her loyalty, she is now at last prepared to move past what that location ever led her to become. "Welcome back," I said. I took a tiny box out of the back of my closet and realized that we had a lot more to create at home that evening. Some items from that last day at TechLine were still in it. The pen they gave me when we surpassed 50 million in revenue, my mug, and the parting message from my team. Those years hadn't been squandered, so I saw each object with clarity rather than grief. They had softened and molded me. This moment had been made possible by them. I was labeled a bottleneck a year ago. They never realized that I wasn't impeding the company's progress. I was trying to keep my composure. And now, with the right people on my own terms and with my name in the proper place, I was creating something even more powerful. The footnotes do not conceal anything. Clearly, openly, and permanently written rather than buried away in someone else's words at the summit.